The Valhalla Academy is one of the top 3 hunter institutes in the world. Every year, many hunters try to enter this institute, but with a success rate of 1 in 500, few succeed, and even among those who do, only 150 students can graduate. You can see that the level of difficulty is just like real life, right? On the first day of class, there's already a bunch of people training, and anything goes. People with nothing in their hands against people with swords. Watching them is the senior combat instructor, Lee Sang-chil. After a while, someone named Yumin Jun arrives to see the candidate from his family who deserves all our attention. Yu So-yun, from the Yushin family, one of the 5 most prestigious families in Korea. Everyone who crosses her path is defeated due to her talent with mana and the sword. She is a promising talent, but she doesn't draw much attention from the instructor until it is mentioned that her family has communicated with a constellation guardian from the Yushin family. This grabs the instructor's attention. In this world, there are 5 chosen ones to be the constellation guardians, where it is normal for hunters to receive blessings and protection from the guardians or make a contract for it. Each of these 5 guardians has a different power. The Yushin family has the god of the sword, Jang San family, the god of spirits, Jin Choi family, the god of martial arts, Ocean family, the god of fists, John family, the god of the bow. Yu Yun, having communicated with a guardian, is a great genius with incredible potential. Passing the academy test will be easy, they say. This is so important that the whole world is watching through cameras. The fight of the 17-year-old super talent will be against Kim Ju-hya, also 17 years old. The instructors are even surprised at how calm the boy was knowing who he was facing. Confident in an easy victory, the fight begins. Our girl draws her sword, but there's no sign of the boy. She decides to attack. Her swordsmanship was incredible, as well as her control of mana, and the attack was precise. Guys, believe it or not, he just punched her in the chest and won the fight. Our protagonist was even disappointed with the fight. And now we see the real truth. 300 years in the past, in the Tower of Destruction, there was a fight between the owner of the Tower of Destruction, Brace the King of Destruction, and the martial king Kim Hae-on-oh, even with equal footing. The fight ended with the victory of the martial king. Here, the foot was in the face. By defeating the King of Destruction, who was trying to destroy the world, he saved the earth. But his injuries were very severe. When the tower collapsed with the defeat of its owner, the brave martial king couldn't escape. He only had time to lament because he was always very poor and became a hunter to survive and wouldn't be able to enjoy the money, fame, and power he always dreamed of. Before entering the tower, he even prevented his disciples from entering because it was very dangerous. And in the end, it was indeed. But at least if it was only him being crushed by the debris, then he would be happy. Here you understand why he deserved to reincarnate. He reincarnated into the body of a boy 300 years after that day in the Tower of Destruction. So even with this new weak body, he is very strong. Currently on Earth, times are peaceful, so he can finally have the peaceful life he always wanted. But nothing good lasts forever, and the curse system window appeared, informing him that in 5 years the Tower of Destruction would reappear in the world, and the great hero must prepare. In other words, the peace he dreamed of wouldn't last. The protagonist even thinks he should have burned Brace's body to ashes or something, but there's no use crying over the past. Anyway, in this era, the conditions of the tower should be easier, so he decides he will have his peaceful life and enjoy it even after this warning. The system also orders him to find his lost weapons and memories. For that, he must go to Valhalla, and the system gives him the exact address. Even without knowing what these weapons and memories were, or even what place this was, he went to the academy. On the first day, his opponent was a 17-year-old Hulk from the Ocean family, the Kings of the Fist. The instructor kept an eye on the protagonist. This time, his opponent knew what he did on the first day but remained confident. That's because the protagonist didn't look dangerous to him. He even said he would kill him in this fight, but the Hulk spoke in a way the protagonist didn't understand, using some slang. When the Hulk explained that he would send him to hell in this fight, the protagonist just told him to sit down and calm down. The opponent became furious. His talent that brought him here was his physique. His body was perfect. With little training, he achieved the results of geniuses, and there he was, another genius being humiliated by the finger of the poor and failed protagonist. Furious, he charged to attack the protagonist, full of exploding hatred. The protagonist knew his body wasn't as strong as his opponent's, and he recognized that. This punch might indeed send him to hell, so he dodged and then swept the muscular guy off his feet. Look at his style. The protagonist delivers the famous move everyone knows, the powerful chest slap, and once again, with just one strike, the opponent was defeated. He is experienced and counted on his opponent being stupid. The protagonist wins again, confident that even though his body is weak, he will become even stronger than in the past. And this was seen by everyone and also broadcasted, with many scouts from the main teams watching the protagonist stand out among the elite families. One of them is the head of the Kings of the Fist family. He saw the fight and, as an excellent martial artist, noticed the protagonist's talent. One detail is that the Hulk is his eldest son. The father said the son was reckless as always and attacked with everything on the first blow. The most amazing thing is that the protagonist was faster and handled it like a master. Knowing everyone must have noticed this, the old man wants to try to bring the protagonist into his family at any cost. The protagonist's next fight has an audience of shady men, which irritates the protagonist because it's a bunch of adults drooling over a little girl. This being the last fight to determine the ranking of those approved for Valhalla, his opponent is now the second daughter of the Choijin family. Her name is Choi Rin, 17 years old. At least she's prettier than the first one. Let's see if she's more talented. Her first move is to analyze the opponent's reaction. She does this, and there's an awkward atmosphere with both standing still. The protagonist notices this. She's using her brain and let him make the first move, which already made her better than the others. So he calmly moves his heavy hand towards her, approaching her inside. She uses her lightning sword, impressing everyone with her talent for using an elemental skill at her age. And meanwhile, the protagonist calmly watches this. When she sees an opening, she goes for it with force and wham, a powerful slash, but it hits nothing but air. He dodged so fast that when he appeared beside her, even I got startled. Imagine how she felt. Then he delivered the famous chest slap. She was caught off guard but not unprepared. Blocking the strike with her sword, the protagonist starts to see more value in the girl. Aram felt her whole body vibrate from the impact and knew that if it had hit her body, she would have died. Then once again, the protagonist appears in front of her before she can even react, this time mocking her, telling her to dodge this next strike. A short, powerful punch lands on her stomach, her sword glued to her belly, and she collapses, unconscious. Another fight won without holding back just because she was a girl. With this result, the ranking of the students is Kim Joo-hyuk in first place, Choi Aram in second, and some extra in third, along with other extras the manhwa didn't show, being first in the best academy in the world. Of course, a million reporters swarmed him after the event, asking him everything. The protagonist got so irritated that he flipped them off and cursed everyone out on national television. Here are the comments on his video on the internet. Later, in Valhalla, the approved students went to enlist. For the protagonist, being there was no big deal, unlike the others who were so nervous they couldn't sleep. He noticed that none of the approved kids even wanted to look him in the eye. Could it be they were afraid of getting beaten up too? He then wonders if he attracted too much attention yesterday. His plan was just to get into the most important academy in the world, go where the system ordered, and then leave. On the first day, the students were taken to a virtual fighting simulation room. The professor was freaked out. This year, his class had 3 geniuses from the 5 main families, 2 cute girls, and the hot-headed Hulk. Just this made him scared. Then he realizes the guy who defeated all 3 is also in his class. The professor felt sick and even had his blood pressure drop. When he finally calms down and starts the lesson, he introduces himself and immediately causes confusion by teleporting everyone to another place or something like that. Judging by the name of the lesson, it's a simulation of another place. He simulates a goblin attack while emitting an aura of bloodlust to show the real world to the students. This scares even the geniuses from the main families. To them, it's hundreds of goblins wanting to devour everyone. Goblins in pairs. Come here to show you something. Look at the size of this thing. The professor was satisfied with scaring the students, but there was one who felt nothing. So the professor calls the student and asks if he can defeat the monster outside alone. This made the protagonist think about it. The professor's intention was to lower the ego of the famous student by asking if he could do something impossible for him to deny, because no student could do it. He was just waiting for the protagonist to say he couldn't handle the goblins, to put the boy in his place. But to everyone's surprise, the protagonist gave a slight smile, which made the professor angry, as Kim Hyuk said he could do it. The professor, furious, shouted for him to go and try. The protagonist asked something before accepting, inquiring about the reward. Because this must be a test, he will only go if there's a reward. He will go if the professor makes a bet with him. The rage consumed the professor, and he replied that he would do anything the boy wanted. The professor began to explain how the monsters attack. but the protagonist said it didn't matter. He just needed a sword. He handed over the sword, and off the protagonist went, out of the protective barrier. Everyone was scared even within the barrier, the professor hoping the boy's arrogance would cause his defeat. Only violent cuts were seen by all, revealing micro-expressions of the protagonist's psychopathy. He thought it had been 300 years since he last held a sword to fight. When he was a child in his past life, he didn't have these skills. Now he returned to his childhood with the talent of a martial king. When a giant goblin tried to strike, the protagonist dodged effortlessly. Everyone inside the shield watched. The sword the professor gave him was trash, so it didn't make sense how he could cut everything with it. Naturally, the geniuses from the noble families were furious and envious, but one of them was moved, even blushing with emotion. The protagonist easily defeated all the goblins and told the professor he wanted to go to the Hall of Constellations as his reward for the bet, reminding him not to forget a promise. In the practical lesson, the protagonist was a god, but in the theoretical lesson, everyone was calm and confident. The protagonist was exhausted. This was the hardest battle he had in 300 years. The protagonist remembered he never went to school before. This thing called math was something scary. At the end of the day, everyone was heading to the dorms. The protagonist was thinking about the constellations since he knew nothing about them. 300 years ago, these things didn't exist. What he understood was that constellation is the term for those who achieve great fortune and power, treated like gods, usually hunters who reach the pinnacle of power. Valhalla is located in South Korea and is the third largest academy in the world, housing many constellation relics. He thought about many things about the current world, but what's interesting to us is that someone was following him. Shift the scene to the teacher's room, where the recently humiliated professor is recounting his class to the senior instructor, describing how a monster defeated 120 monsters in the simulation. We discover that the protagonist, or at least his body, is an orphan and not from an important family. If he was hiding his past, it wouldn't make sense for him to have attracted so much attention during the academy's admission test. The professor requests permission to take the protagonist to the place he asked for. He does this while feeling very sad about his problematic class. To console the professor, who is lamenting having 3 students from noble families in his class, the senior instructor says he is lucky not to have the exchange student from England, as foreign nobles are even worse. When he learns that his friend is in an even worse situation, the professor feels better about his own work. Nothing is better than knowing the neighbor's grass is worse than yours. Back to the protagonist. Aram followed him. She went up to him and just stared for a while. What could she want? Want to get beaten up again? Yes. No. Just kidding. She went up to him to ask him to teach her fencing. The protagonist, being direct, says no without much thought. She persistently asks why not. Annoyed, he says he just doesn't want to. After this, the protagonist says he's leaving, but the crazy girl responds, "Teach me fencing." But I said no, damn it. He even questions if she's deaf, saying he said no, telling her to get out of his way, and leaves. The next day, the protagonist Kim Hyuk was peacefully sitting in class, contemplating how weak his body was, with terrible mana control and 0 magical power. One way to improve this was to find that thing. Suddenly, someone approached him, the problematic exchange student from England, Rocto Ventric from the Ventric family, along with his assistant Yuria Felix. Since our protagonist knew nothing about the current world, he had no idea who the student was or the significance of his noble family. The arrogant student got angry, thinking the protagonist was ignorant, but still calmly explained about his family and asked if he wanted to become strong. The boy explained about the main families and their affiliated lineages, and how an affiliate could never reach the top. The Ventric family was different from the others because they had a constellation guardian in the family, giving them immense influence in the world due to the Raven Mask. The arrogant boy talked too much, so the protagonist told him to shut up, saying he wasn't interested in hearing this crap. Ventric even asked to make sure he heard correctly what the protagonist had said to him. The protagonist responded even more aggressively, calling him an idiot and saying he wasn't interested in him or in talking to opportunistic people. The guy was about to explode with rage, but someone ordered the students to sit down for class. The arrogant one turned angrily to see who dared to speak to him like that. It was the senior instructor. The instructor added that it didn't matter which family he came from. Fear he obeyed the instructors or left. After being humiliated, he left the room, saying they would meet again. As the protagonist was leaving after class, thinking about what he learned, someone approached him from behind. "Teach me fencing." She came to ask again, and he said no. Cut to the dormitory of the arrogant foreigner from England, who was breaking things in anger after being humiliated by the protagonist. To prove he's a scumbag, he ordered Yuria to do something she didn't want to do. He grabbed her by the hair, threatening to throw her out of the palace family, and other things until until she agreed. His order was to call someone named Dronzer and give the order to eliminate Ju Hyuk. While some hated the protagonist, he was in his room training magic. But it wasn't yielding results with such a weak and impure body. In the middle of his training, he remembered the crazy stalker girl who followed him everywhere, always asking him to teach her fencing whenever he confronted her. He didn't know how to get rid of her, so he lied, saying he would give her a lesson for 10 million. He said this as he was turning to leave, but the girl asked for his phone. Confused, he handed it to her, and Aram added her number and returned the phone. I thought she was going to ask him out, but the crazy girl transferred 100 million to his account and said, "Teach me fencing for 10 lessons." The protagonist returned the money and said it was a joke, then left. Later, he thought maybe having money wouldn't be so bad, but quickly changed his mind, knowing money wouldn't be a problem once he got that thing. Dressed like an excavator, the protagonist went after that thing, searching for a hidden 300-year-old vault in the mountains of the academy. There should be at least 3 or 4 of them hidden. With the little magic he had, he emitted a mana wave to locate the vaults. Entering the area, he pulled out a shovel and began digging. His body was so weak that after less than a minute of digging, he was exhausted. He rested for a while, thinking he should have buried the vault shallower in the past, and then resumed digging. It took him all night, but he finally found it. After searching for the lock, he made a key that only someone who knew the shape could create with magic, and opened the vault. Vault closed, vault open, we're inside. The place was full of gold, but what he really wanted were the mana storage stones, the true treasure here. They had been here for over 300 years and was still amazing. Now he would have enough mana to upgrade his weak body. Plus there was so much gold here that he couldn't carry it all. The next day at school, after spending all night digging, his muscles were on fire. Choi Erin was about to ask again. The protagonist felt sorry for her persistence. He researched her family and found out the Choi Jean family was the only one practicing fencing. So he asked why she didn't learn from her own family. She said it had to be him because she had never seen anyone in her family wield a sword better than him. The protagonist was as surprised as you are reading this. Her father, the leader of the fencing family, wasn't better than the protagonist. As she was about to say something, the teacher came to call Ju Hyuk politely. "Why now? It's about what you asked for before. Goodbye, girl." Choi Erin was about to ask again but changed her mind. Then, miraculously, Ju Hyuk said, "Tomorrow at 6 in the morning in the training field." She couldn't believe she was actually going to get a free lesson. After that, he went to the teacher's room. The professor said they had to be quick because there was a class starting soon. The protagonist's request for access to the Constellation building had been approved. He just needed to go to the school's basement, but he couldn't go beyond a certain floor. Ju Hyuk agreed, and that night after class he went. The professor was surprised the protagonist didn't mind only being able to go to the 2nd floor of the building. So we skipped to the professor leading the protagonist to the underground building where Valhalla's treasures, the Constellation Hall, were kept. The place was heavily guarded, with more security here than at the academy's entrance, showing how important this place was. The protagonist observed that the tower walls above were covered with protective magic seals to the limit, as someone might hypothetically do to descend to the 2nd floor unnoticed. Seeing his dangerous ideas, the professor warned that he would be arrested or expelled for trying, and it wouldn't work anyway, hypothetically. Not only that, the professor said that on the 2nd floor, the power of the constellations flowed freely, and anyone entering would have their mind shattered by the power and go insane. The protagonist asked a few questions like this before entering, making the professor reconsider if he would get into trouble because of this kid. He was now in doubt, but after the protagonist entered, there was nothing he could do. Inside, the protagonist confirmed it. The system said that on the 5th underground floor were his memories and weapons, but he couldn't enter. But he came here for that, so he just descended anyway. As he went down the first stairs, he saw several vaults and nothing else. The system appeared to him, saying the requirements had been met and he would be moved to the main hall. Everything went black until the protagonist saw the former king of destruction, who recognized him too. Barche said it had been 300 years since they last met. It was a grand reunion. The guy didn't even finish speaking before taking a punch to the mouth. The protagonist was furious. The guy asked him to calm down and took another punch on the other side. He asked for calm once more and took a 3rd punch to the mouth. 40 punches later, the protagonist got tired, now allowing the guy to talk. The protagonist then started with kicks. After 32 kicks, Barche managed to speak, explaining that this was an imaginary world, a space within a relic, and this body wasn't real. The explanation was that the king of destruction had become a constellation, but the protagonist didn't care and punched him in the mouth again. After waiting outside for 30 minutes, the professor saw Ju Hyuk coming out without any problem. The relieved professor asked if he did anything wrong inside. The protagonist replied, he did nothing. If he had gone down from the first floor, his mind would have broken, right? The professor agreed and left, thinking what a sly kid this protagonist was. On the way, he thought about the conversation he had. 99% of it was punches, and 1% was him asking if it was the King of Destruction who made that system window, informing that in 5 years the Tower of Destruction would reappear. Barche said it wasn't him. Furthermore, Barche revealed he also received a message with the system window telling him to recover his memories by meeting the reincarnated Kim Joo-hyuk. He explained that in the past, a mysterious person made him the owner of the Tower of Destruction, but he didn't remember the rest of his past life. Unlike the protagonist, who remembered everything from the past, they shared what their system messages said. And finally, Barche revealed that the protagonist's weapon was one of the 4 sacred relics, and Barche himself became a constellation because he used the sword as a relic. You brast it. Now the protagonist didn't understand anything. His sword became a relic, and inside it was a constellation, his former enemy whom he killed. He left with his sword, the kid having stolen a relic from the country's most important academy. Okay, the maximum security here is a joke. Some second-year academy students, lazing around, saw the protagonist and decided to test if his first-place ranking in the entrance exam was a big deal. The protagonist, calmly wanting to know if they really wanted to get beaten, heard them say yes. The first would be the bald one, and he immediately struck his throat, and then his chest, sending the guy flying like a bird. The extra averted his gaze for 1 second, and when he looked back, the protagonist had his sword out and told everyone to come at him together. I would have left, but extras are always idiots. 3 hours earlier, the blonde was in the room of the English exchange student, and it was he who hired him to teach Joo-hyuk a lesson. As a reward, he would help his family. The kid from the Sunrise family accepted dealing with this because, as a second-year student, it was impossible to lose to a first-year. Everyone who moved to the second year in Valhalla only passed when they went to the 4th floor and made a contract with one of the constellations. Someone like him, a contractor, was sure he could easily defeat him. That's what he thought until now, as watching the student defeat everyone like they were ants made him change his mind. It didn't even seem like he was fighting. Those who took too long to attack got beaten even harder than the others, leading the guys wondering if they should flee or get beaten too. Everyone was crushed like ants, not one left conscious. Then the protagonist woke the leader with a slap and asked who he was and who sent him to attack. He gave his name but refused to reveal who ordered it. The protagonist wasn't irritated by this. Loyalty was good even from people who tried to harm him. The extra had the courage to threaten that the protagonist would be expelled when they found out he fought at the academy. Boys, the protagonist says it's fine. Spread the word that a first-year student defeated 10 second-year students. If they believe it, all 10 will be expelled too, ending their chances of joining a guild in the future. The protagonist won the fight and the argument. Later, the trash from England was waiting for a call confirming that the protagonist was crushed. When the phone rang, he heard only one phrase, "I'm dropping this job. You better not get in that guy's way, goodbye." Ventric asked if they would at least report the protagonist to the academy, saying that if they did, the Ventric family would support them if they were expelled. Still, the kid refused and said goodbye. The power of fear won over money. After that, Ventric ordered a renegade member of his family currently in Mexico to deal with the protagonist definitively. The next morning, the protagonist was ready to train. He had scheduled a meeting with the fencing girl, and as he stretched, she appeared for the private lesson saying, "Teach me fencing." But the protagonist's response was, no. Before learning fencing, they needed to improve their physical conditioning. The girl, absent-minded, didn't understand anything beyond "teach me fencing." The protagonist had her stretch because the training would be intense. He noticed that people nowadays only train mana and forget about physical fitness, which is a mistake. Aram herself has a lot of mana, but if she runs 20 meters, she faints just like me. They started with 200 push-ups, 1, 2, 3, squats to strengthen the glutes and more gym exercises. After almost an hour, the protagonist said that this was just the beginning. When he mentioned that they were going to run 20 kilometers, the girl regretted wanting to learn fencing. Later, in the classroom, the protagonist felt the pleasurable pain after the training, while Aram was about to go into a coma from the pain. Her arm was shaking so much it seemed possessed. On this painful day, the teacher announced she would administer a written test on dimensional monsters and asked for silence from everyone. The test would assess knowledge on how to handle monsters. The girl with Makima's eyes took the test easily. The big guy seemed not to know much, and Aram answered all the questions with, "Teach me fencing." The protagonist was the quickest to finish the test and was waiting for the teacher to collect them. When time was up and she asked to collect the papers from the back to the front, Aram couldn't even turn her neck, so she asked for help. Everyone left the classroom, and the god of destruction living inside the protagonist's sword asked his his master if he was sure about the answers he had marked. From what he said, they didn't seem to be correct. Soon after, we see the teacher in the staff room, upset about something. Among all the students, one had crossed all limits of common sense. She was furious with the answers of a certain student. While grading the normal students' exams, another teacher passed by wanting to know how his students performed. She said they all did well, as expected of the cream of the crop. This was good news, and then he was leaving happy, but when he heard the protagonist's name, he choked on his coffee. The teacher was furious with this student's answers, and in the next class, she was going to take him down. A week later, in the next class, with everyone standing, she asked Kim Joo-hyuk to step forward, and he did so calmly. Her goal was to confront his answers in front of the class to teach him to take the test seriously. According to her, there was no place in the world where his answers made sense. She questioned if he had taken the exam seriously. He said yes, so she began. How do you deal with a goblin? The student's answer was, punch in the stomach. The second question, when 8 goblins run towards you, how do you defend yourself? The student's answer, send them all to hell. The teacher was already irritated again with these answers. Another question was, what do you do against a monster with very high defense? His answer was, defeat with an even stronger hit. A punch will do. The teacher almost went crazy with this bold student, but he confirmed all the absurd answers in front of everyone. Then, to make him feel ashamed and admit his failure, she activated the simulation room to show the answers in practice. A goblin with very high defense appeared. She told him to show how his answer was correct. At no point did the protagonist get nervous, which was suspicious. He politely left his exam for the teacher and grabbed a sword, headed towards the goblin without any hurry. The teacher knew he had defeated 120 goblins in another professor's class, but facing a stone goblin with super high defense was different. When they attacked, she was confident the boy would face reality. The protagonist simply threw the sword at the stone goblin's stomach, which shattered entirely and was defeated. As I said, a stomach hit resolves almost everything. Everyone was impressed again with the protagonist, except Aram, who already knows the mysterious student's secrets better. Now, the teacher also wanted to know how he did it. He said it was just about hitting the stomach. There was no secret. The teacher was going crazy with this kid, but still asked about the second question, and the 8 angry goblins coming your way. Prove your answer. He even questions if this was supposed to be challenging. She then releases the simulation that creates a cave and the goblins that will attack. 3 goblins saw him. The test was to use strategy to prevent these 3 from calling the others. Before she even finished thinking, the protagonist knocked down the first, toppled another, and thrust the sword into the last one's mouth. He didn't give the goblins a chance to call the rest. That's how the teacher learned that all his answers were correct. In the following days, Aram tried to survive the physical training before starting the fencing training. In the end, the poor girl could barely stand. The protagonist also got tired with the same training, but it seemed that Aram never got close to the protagonist's preparation. When he asked how Aram would face the class monsters, her answer was simple. She would borrow the power of the constellations. As the protagonist thought, they ignored the training and depended on these constellations for any battle. It's not that the protagonist is against doing this, but what if they enter a dungeon with magic restrictions or in a very long fight, run out of mana from fighting for so long? How will they deal with emergencies? He believes that true strength must exist in the person and only depend on help from an external power for convenience. Then, the protagonist asked if she thought that this exercise to improve stamina was a waste of time. Aram said no. She agreed with his lessons, but only agreed to train like this because he had said that only after this would he teach her fencing. With this answer, it means she hasn't accepted yet. She could finish today's training, but his will continue. In fact, he asked if she wanted to continue, but Aram couldn't take it anymore and left. Otherwise, she would die before training fencing. For the protagonist, the basis of everything is to have a powerful physique and then focus on mana control. That's why he places so much importance on this first. Beside him, the student he defeated was training and he hadn't even noticed. The big guy never stopped honing his body, even though he is considered the best of all in this regard. He said he trained there every morning. When the big guy left, the protagonist recognized that the boy's strength was his determination in his body. After much training, the protagonist consulted the system about his mission. He went to the basement and picked up his weapon and left a replica in its place. Now, the next step was to go to a house in the Valhalla forest to recover another valuable thing. If it weren't for the system, he wouldn't be in a school but enjoying the luxuries of normal life that he hadn't had before. But at least he can hit the brace whenever he wants because of these system missions. Also, he wanted to discover more about reincarnation. Meanwhile, in England, at the Ventric Mansion, the the family that loved suspicious masks. Adelia Ventric was receiving reports from the butler about missions and about Rokdo Ventric in Korea, and about the boy's contact with the banished member of the family, Desira Ventric. Desira was the black sheep of the Ventric clan because he had committed several crimes using the family name, including attacking 5 students from the school. He was expelled from the clan at 20 and now roamed the world while continuing to embarrass the clan. Adelia, knowing of Rokdel's contact with this scum, ordered to keep an eye on him and inform Rokdel that if he did anything else wrong, he would be expelled like Desira. Adelia, besides being beautiful, seems to be honest. She is against those who use the power of the family for their own benefit, because the power of the constellation of the Ventric family can only be used for its own benefit. These are her principles and honesty. To set an example on this matter, the story cuts to a class on how not to use the powers of the constellations for evil. The teacher explains how those who don't like this video are criminals and contractors who use constellations to commit crimes are also. As the class continued, the protagonist just thought about his current body. In his life as a hero, when he was this age, his body was much worse than this boy's. Even if it's strange to have a weak body compared to what he had at the end of his life, this body evolves very quickly with his knowledge and can certainly become stronger than his true self. He doesn't understand why he was so sedentary and with such poor mana circulation at this age. Basically, the original owner of this body was not meant to be weak, and he still doesn't know what happened to the boy who owned this body before. During class, Makima calls the protagonist and passes him a note with just "hey" written on it. He doesn't understand why this other girl doesn't just write what she wants. A note just for that. Maybe all the girls here are crazy. Later, in the last class of the day, the teacher in charge announces that this weekend they will have permission to leave the academy, but they must notify the campus first if they intend to. The protagonist goes to inform that he wants to leave the academy during the weekend, and suddenly someone calls him with a "hey." He looks and sees it's the Makima from AliExpress. The protagonist immediately asks if she also finds it fun to follow others and make selfish requests, and why send useless notes that say nothing. He insists she just say what she wants from him, but the girl seems embarrassed and shy, unable to say a single word. It's not hard to irritate our protagonist, so he tells her to say it now or go away, you crazy girl. She can't say what she wants, but can she question why she's a crazy girl? In fact, Makima wanted to ask the protagonist how he managed to destroy a goblin with a weak sword and no magic. This shouldn't be possible. He was so incredible and strong even without coming from a wealthy family. She wanted to talk more with him, but her pride wouldn't let her speak. After all, it's very important and noble to ask for help from a commoner. When it seemed like she was finally going to ask, the teacher appears and interrupts the two. The protagonist was focused on his life goal and girls kept appearing around him. He even asks if the teacher doesn't hate her due to the class in which she was embarrassed. The teacher says she doesn't care about that. She believed there was only one way to handle those situations, and he opened her eyes to the possibilities. She even says she is grateful to him now. The woman drags the protagonist, asking him to be her assistant. He refuses, of course. His goals now do not include learning what he already knows how to do. Makima in the end couldn't overcome the barriers of her pride, but realizing this didn't make the girl sad. Just one more who will fall in love with the protagonist soon. Returning to his room at night, the protagonist has a computer, but it's on his phone that he researches where he can sell the treasures he took from the safe. The place for this is called the secret market, a space where people from anywhere in the world can trade. It is known as the black market due to the wrongdoers who use it. The protagonist's deduction is that the market is illegal, but still the government does not interfere because it was created by an important constellation guardian. When he researches how to go to the market, he receives a message from Aram. The girl is very different in everything she does. She likes to send many emojis and makes it seem like a tragedy, but in reality, she just wanted to say that she will miss training because she needs to travel. He found it funny how dramatic she is, but is he laughing at her? Aram thought, but that wasn't it. He just wanted to wish her a good trip, and she really likes sending emojis. He hangs up the phone because the girl won't stop, so the next day he goes after the so-called market. In an abandoned cafe he enters and then just turns right. Through a normal door he passes through it, and comes out in another place where it's already night. This place seems familiar to the protagonist, something from his past life, but before he thinks more about the reason for that, someone calls him. A man in a leather jacket is the one who receives a fee of 2 million money to give access to the market and assist customers. The protagonist pulls out a brick of money that he won in the prize for being first in the academy and uses this for his investment. Today's goal is to sell some jewels from his secret safe. The man in the leather jacket explains how the market works and recommends Morris's store at the end of the street for selling low-value jewels. Before he goes, The man hands a mask to the protagonist. Everyone here prefers to hide their identities, and even though the boy doesn't care about this, it's better to follow this custom. At the market, everyone walks with masks. When he finds Morris's store, the protagonist says he has some things for him to evaluate, as he wants to sell. He takes out a simple bag from his backpack and places it on the table. Nothing that a student might have could be of high value. He picks up one of the rings to analyze and to his surprise almost dies of a heart attack. It was an artifact from the era of destruction, something extremely rare. Morris checks each of the items in the bag and sees that they are all relics of an ancient era. The protagonist is curious to know the value of these items, but Morris is curious to know how this boy has these things. He can't say exactly what they are worth right now and apologizes to the young client. The rings are so expensive that Morris doesn't have the money to buy them. Before responding to something, he questions where he got these rings. The protagonist comments that he thought such things weren't questioned here, and indeed, that's against the rules in this place. The truth is that Morris doesn't know the value of these items. They are so valuable that he suggests the best thing is to auction the rings in the market, but that would take 2 or 3 weeks. The protagonist insists on knowing how much Morris believes they would be worth at auction. Despite not being sure, he shows and says the minimum is this value. Although Hyan knew that rarities in his past life did not expect such a high value, he couldn't even count how many zeros are in that number. The protagonist is willing to sell to Morris for that value, but Morris only has a quarter of that in his entire safe. Even though it's almost 5 times less than the minimum that can be expected at an auction, the protagonist accepts to sell for that value. Morris was amazed by such a good offer. The truth is that the value of these items goes beyond rarity. The reason is that the constellations that dominate the world and emerge after the era of destruction react well to these items, and today Morris is sure they are genuine. The energy of destruction is still strong in them, and whoever possesses one of these items can make a contract with the most powerful S-rank constellations in the world. Morris buys them all. Sometime later, someone goes to Morris and leaves a doubt in the air. The protagonist returns home. He sold for a value 5 times lower because he wanted the money urgently and didn't want to explain how he got it. He got so much money from those items that he won't have to worry about money for a long time. When he was going to return home peacefully, the phone rings. The meddling teacher had gotten his number from the school and practically forced him to go have lunch with her now. Although he is rich now, when the woman said she would pay for the food, he couldn't refuse and went to her. You must also have been curious about Morris. The person who appeared there is called Black Cat, and he is the owner of the market. That explains why Morris was stunned by his presence. They had never spoken in years of market because the man is extremely important. The reason for the contact is that Morris asked to participate in the auction for the first time in years. Then Black Cat wanted to know what he had to announce. Black Cat, in fact, works for the constellation that is the true owner of the market, and he examines the items before they go to auction because the constellation might be interested in them. As soon as he saw the rings, the constellation went crazy to have those items for itself. The constellation on the other side really wanted Morris's rings, and that's how Morris lost his ring that night. The teacher who called the student on the weekend paid for a pizza and a generous portion of shrimp pasta to try to convince him, once again, to be her assistant. The protagonist refused without even thinking twice. Anyone would want this opportunity, but he must be the only person in the world who doesn't care. She argued that she could get him a scholarship and that they could write an article together. She almost offered everything, even the most tempting things for men, but the protagonist still didn't care. All he wants is to get to the center of the big forest and fulfill the system's orders, and these distractions will only get in the way. As a last attempt, she offered information about Aram to get him to become her assistant. Even so, the protagonist didn't want to, but the teacher insisted and started talking about Choi Aram and how she is about to be disowned from the family. The teacher tried everything to convince the protagonist to be her assistant, but she couldn't. But he was curious about why she is so strict in class and so childish outside of it. The woman explained what she believes to be right. Dealing with monsters is something so dangerous that it cannot be treated as something easy and simple. They cannot forget the risks they run, and that is why they must always be cautious even with the weakest of monsters. This left him satisfied, and as he was satisfied with the food too, he left. The protagonist is literally the freest guy in the world. If he doesn't want something, he's not afraid to refuse. Now that the teacher mentioned Aram, let's go to her family, the Choijin, the leader of the True Story Guild and head of the Choijin family. Jeonseok was with his 2 children, the eldest son Jingyan and the second daughter, Choi Aram. Jeonseok says they will have a big test where they will have a chance to inherit the family treasure and become the clan leader. However, whoever fails will be eliminated from the family. Then he asks if they are prepared to participate in the great great test of the Choijin family. Both say yes, so, in 3 weeks, the test will be held. When the family meeting ends, the older brother asks if Aram didn't get to read between the lines. She can't even talk. Of course, she didn't read anything other than teach me fencing. The brother says that the father didn't want her to take the test and is just going through the formalities. An illegitimate daughter has no right to be the leader of the family. He's only agreeing with everything because they know she has no chance of winning. For the first time, we see the girl show her emotions. He throws in her face that he has a contract with a constellation and she can't even touch him in combat. He walks away while threatening to destroy her for sucking the family's money for so many years. Despite being raised in such a cruel world, Aram's determination does not diminish. Remembering her sick mother reminds her that her only option is to win. Her mother's dream before dying was for Aram to become the leader of the family, to have the right to be free. Then we return to the classroom sometime later. The teacher explains that every quarter tests are held and the last placed are expelled from the academy. It's a filter to select the best and force everyone to strive all the time. They are practical and theoretical tests. The protagonist knows that, in practice, there is no risk, but in theory, it could be a big problem for him. The protagonist's idea is as follows. He will cheat on this test, and the responsibility for giving the right answers is Brace's. If he can't do that, his life will become a nightmare. When the class ended, Aram for the first time says something other than teach me fencing. She asks if they will train today as well. The protagonist says that now she is ready to learn fencing. The girl even glows with happiness. Now that we know more about her, we can deduce that her family didn't train her and doesn't really consider her important. In the training room, the first thing the protagonist wants to see is her sword. She draws the sword and they start with the very basics, how to hold the sword correctly. With simple guidance on how to wield the sword, mana naturally flows through the blade, something she didn't even know how to do. The next step is for her to attack with everything she has. Aram begins to emanate lightning and her body's mobility surprises even herself. Even though the protagonist defends easily, she is much faster and he confirms this. Another lesson is how to concentrate magic on body parts for more speed. The blows are good, but she must also learn to defend. The protagonist also moves a lot, and the exchange of blows between them lasts an hour, with Aram giving her all while Hyan teaches and gives tips. When the class ends, she can't even stand up. As always, her body is at its limit. However, she can already see the results. She is much stronger than on the day of the opening ceremony, yet she has not been able to reach the protagonist. He is on another level. Before the class ends, she wants a serious duel with Hyan. For the protagonist, it might be interesting since she is raw talent and fun to train. He thinks that 300 years ago, she would have had the potential to be a disciple of his. She asks again about the duel, and he, to provoke her, says he doesn't want a duel so that she would insist as she always does. However, this time she accepts the answer without protest, which is surprising because she is extremely stubborn. She even says that if he doesn't want it, it's because it's not the best thing to do right now. Aram accepted to follow the words of her master to the minute to become stronger. 2 weeks later, the students are gathered. The senior instructor explains that the bi-monthly test will be an attack on a dungeon. When the entrances appear, he says the recommended number for each group is 8 people, but they are free to form larger or smaller groups. They will have 5 hours to complete their dungeons. Their level is F+. Whoever fails in 5 hours will be expelled. Even those from noble families are nervous, because the rules are absolute, and if they fail they will be expelled for sure. The teacher says the time has started to count, and they must choose their teams and organize quickly so as not to waste valuable time. The confidence of the strongest students is evident. Soyeon Makima decides to join a team of 8 people, and another group forms a team of 20 people. Most opt for the advice of 8 people in the group, and the evaluation begins outside with each person's decision on the formation of the groups. Hyan, who just observed and didn't make friends with anyone, is not called by anyone. Aram, similarly, is alone. Curious about the girl, he asks what she intends to do. Aram states that she will do what the master orders. That doesn't make sense to him. The girl is trying to follow all his words since the last training. Anyway, he just says he will go in alone. Aram then takes this as a goal and decides she will go in alone too. Her master didn't care, because he himself said the dungeon seems very easy, so it's not dangerous. Aram is not good with words and understood this as part of his. Another group saw the beautiful and lonely girl and invited her to join their team, as they are 7 people, and she would complete the group. But the stubborn girl refused refuses the invitation and announces that she will go in alone, and she really goes alone. In everyone's eyes, this is madness, because failing here means certain expulsion, and as she goes into the dungeon alone, in the monitoring room, they can see and control the environment of all the simulated dungeons. Individual and collective performance is worth points, and everyone is evaluated at the same time. The teacher in charge is amazed by the competence of the senior instructor. In the past, he was a legendary contractor with 99% success in his missions. According to Lee Sang-chul, this year's students are great, especially those from noble families. In particular, Soyeon stands out, managing to define the best formation and control her team, in addition to performing various functions that give her more points. The instructor comments that if it weren't for the protagonist defeating her on the first day, her reputation would be impeccable. Anyway, as the tests progress, she should return to the top for being an exemplary student. And speaking of the protagonist, the instructor tries to find out where he is and finds nothing. This is curious, so he wonders if it would be possible for him to have already completed the test in record time, until he checks the list of those who completed the test, and there is the protagonist's name. He finished the test in 23 minutes. This leaves the instructor perplexed. How could a student achieve this time? It would be impossible for him not to try to see the recording immediately. Alone, the student Hyan showed no fear. With a smile of someone who knows what he's doing, he seemed like a chainsaw slicing through everything ahead. Two giant goblins tried to attack him, missed, and didn't get another chance. While watching the 23 minutes of terror, the other two teachers were also there, impressed. The dungeon boss, programmed to push a group of 8 students to their limit, was defeated with a single stab. Undoubtedly, Hyan finished in first place, and all the teachers realized that he was not normal. When everyone left the dungeons, they were exhausted and injured. Even the best had marks showing how difficult the test was. Aram was there too, with some cuts on her clothes after completing the test, and Hyan was the only one as clean as at the start of the test. The final ranking was the protagonist in first, Aram in second, Soyeon in third, the big guy in fourth, and the rest don't matter. The senior instructor expected the protagonist to be first, but not without any injuries. His potential is worthy of the world's best, which is incredible, but his surprise was seeing Aram in second place. They don't understand why she went alone like the protagonist. Her time was longer, and she got injured in the fights, but still managed to complete the challenge alone. The responsible teacher, who was once an executive of the Choijin Guild, knows Aram well. Even though she was exemplary, this behavior doesn't make sense. He suspects that the protagonist is influencing her, but it's just a suspicion. Rockdale, from another class, came to check the neighboring class's ranking just to get angry seeing the protagonist at the top. On the same day, he will meet Desira, who arrived in Korea. The Ventric meeting couldn't be in any place other than a fancy one. Desira, who came from Mexico especially to eliminate the protagonist, eats like an animal, and Rockdale seems afraid of him. Desira asks if he's authorized to eliminate the protagonist. Rockdale replies that the choice is his, but it's only necessary to teach a lesson to the arrogant one who belittled his name. After negotiating how to act, Rockdale is to arrange the scenario in Valhalla for Desira to act, and even his assistant was involved against her will. A week later, the protagonist requests another authorization to leave the Valhalla campus. This was only possible because he did very well in the bi-monthly exam. There is a limit on how many times one can leave the academy per semester. This time he is going to Suwon. He was focused on reaching his destination, and didn't expect someone to be willing to get in his way just out of the whim of arrogant rich people. A man with a crazy look stood in front of the protagonist and greeted him as if he knew him. The protagonist, polite, asked who he was, but the lunatic insinuated that it didn't matter. The protagonist is no fool. He came here because he was invited by a mysterious person. He knew the goal was to get rid of him, and the man praised his intuition for that. But according to the protagonist, it wasn't intuition. He knew it for days. He literally threw in the man's face that it was predictable and nothing special. Annoyed, the first attack of the lunatic was filled with rage. Of course, he missed. Even though the attack was strong, the protagonist was calm. This Desira was confident in his strength, and even though the protagonist showed no fear, he recognized that he was strong, his body was fragile, and any attack of that power could destroy him. So he decided to use strategy. The protagonist ran, and the man followed. Unconcerned, the lunatic prepared an attack. But in seconds he was surprised by a counterattack, with the protagonist asking if he had a brain in his head. A blow to the forehead almost cracked the skull. Hyan attempted another blow to the head but missed. Actually, the protagonist let him dodge to say the same thing Desira said, that he was lucky to dodge. It didn't take long for the arrogant one to feel fear of the monster in front of him. In the past, Desira used all kinds of elixirs to strengthen himself, and that was his talent, high elixir resistance. His parents spent fortunes on this, and by the age of 16, he already had the body and power of an adult. His parents' intention was to use their son to gain recognition for the family, but he didn't accept that. The first people he eliminated were his own parents. After being expelled from the clan, his life was freer, and money wasn't a problem. His real motive for coming to Korea was to find a challenge his age to play with, but now he didn't understand how there was such a monster. It couldn't be natural. Desira asked what elixirs the protagonist used to become so strong. Hyan laughed at this in front of the enemy, wondering what the hell this guy was talking about. Does anyone do something so trashy like that? Is he a cheater using it to hide his weakness? Desira contained his anger but questioned whether the protagonist didn't also become so strong using that. Of course not. He even said that he could compare Desira to a strong genius at school before, but now he realized it would be an insult to Sihya, who trains so hard every day. After being so insulted as never in his life, Desira decided that even if he wasn't as strong as this guy yet, he could use his incredible tools to defeat him. The protagonist realized that the dagger was a magical item with great destructive power. Desira asked Kim Joo-hyuk for his last words, but what happened was that these were the last words said by Desira before losing all his teeth. How does someone wait for the enemy to attack while holding such a powerful item? He was thrown against a tree, and to the sadness of Mother Nature, this trash was responsible for the death of an innocent tree. But that wasn't the end. The protagonist declared that before Desira loses consciousness, he would answer some questions. Desira was willing to answer everything now, but Joo-hyuk shouted that he would only ask questions after he's satisfied. Rockdale was in his room waiting for news of success, and thinking about how he would cover up the accident that caused Hyan's death. He says they will celebrate a lot today, and when he receives a call from Desira, he hears only a groan. On the other end of the line, the protagonist made the lunatic groan on the phone to show what happened to him. The protagonist even said that Desira asked Rockdale to burn incense in his memory after he died. Hyan says that Rockdale will be next now. Rockdale was so terrified that he hung up the phone, leaving the protagonist talking alone. Rude, these rich people. Now that the message was given, Hyan thinks about what to do with the body. Actually, he didn't die, but he will never want to look even at a picture of the protagonist, let alone face him in person. Yuria, who went to get tea for Rockdale and him to celebrate, was happy when she left, but when she returned, her master was about to explode with rage. Rockdale began to think that if the information about him trying to kill someone at the academy reached his family, it would be terrible. But what could he do now against the guy who defeated the strongest mercenary he knows? His plan now is to wait and see if the protagonist will leak this information or blackmail him for money. In other words, he has no plan and will just hope the protagonist doesn't tell the Ventric family. Hyuk, when leaving the park, was precisely planning the right time to report him for this. His pet Constellation suggests that he should have just killed Desira and then Rokdo Ventric too, but the protagonist says that the 300-year-old him would do that. But now he's the 16-year-old student Kim Joo-hyuk, and he can't go around killing people without causing problems. The current world is different and at peace. Barche also says that the skill Desira used before is familiar to him. Barche doesn't remember where but recalls a magic of that type. He also asks if the protagonist didn't notice his magic, but the protagonist didn't care and told him to shut up. After destroying Desira, the protagonist woke up the mercenary to ask a question. He even had to put his jaw back in place for him to talk. He asked who gave the order to kill the protagonist. The mercenary didn't want to talk, but the protagonist used his incredible dialogue skills to convince the guy to reveal all his secrets. Now he finally tells that Rokdo Ventric sent him after him. Exactly that Rokdo Ventric from that day. Another thing is that Desira is not from the academy, where he came from and what his name is. Desira didn't want to reveal this information, but when asked if he wanted more broken fingers, the guy said everything. His name is just Desira now. He is from the first species and works as an independent mercenary. Our protagonist has heard of the first species and questions if he thinks it's cool to be a mercenary because he's just a bully paid for that. Despite the complete defeat, Desira claims that Hyuk is lucky in life. If he had waited 30 more seconds, the fight's outcome would be different. In the end, our hero is not a bad guy. He would even let the guy go, but now he changed his mind. He is better off silent, so please don't ever speak again. Returning to the academy later, the protagonist starts thinking about how to get back at Rokdo Ventric, who was hindering his goal with the system. The protagonist recorded the entire conversation with Desira, and after thinking about how to release it, he calls a crazy professor for an assistant. She answers, asking if he finally decided to be her assistant. He says no, he wants to know if she knows any journalists. The protagonist arranged for the newspaper to publish news about the Ventrics ordering a crime inside the academy. The news and comments on the internet about it are here. With an iPhone 45, the protagonist tarnished the Ventric's reputation, but what he didn't expect was it would affect the family in England. The protagonist didn't even want to affect the whole family, just the guy for committing a crime. The family's leader had to publicly apologize to the student attacked by the family member and declare that Desira was excommunicated from the family. The same Desira claimed that Rokdo Ventric was the mastermind, but later changed his testimony and took all the blame. She also said she would personally apologize to the attacked student and take Rokdo Ventric back home for investigation. After this statement, she didn't speak to the press again. Rokdo Ventric, who saw this on the internet, felt his body freeze with fear. His father called to inform him he must return to England immediately. All that was left for Rokdo was his anger and helplessness. Yuria remained silent about all this. The next day, the protagonist found out that Desira declared the Ventrics had no connection. The mercenary was taken to the Ventric family's headquarters. The protagonist didn't like that, but whatever. The important thing is Rokdo is gone. Hayek went to the teacher's room to thank the professor for helping with a trustworthy journalist. And as always, girls are crazy in this world, be my assistant. I said no, damn it. The professor pouted, wanting to know why he called her then. Could this be a date? The protagonist wasn't even surprised anymore and told her to return to reality. If he wanted, I think the professor would give him a chance. He went there just to thank and give some information he has about monsters and how to deal with them, but in exchange for being excused from classes this weekend again. Meanwhile, on a ship heading to the Tower prison, a certain Desira is aboard as a prisoner. His plan is to remain silent and take all the blame alone, not to harm the Ventrics. He is sure they will repay the favor. In less than 5 years, maybe he should be out of prison. Unfortunately for this mercenary, retirement came earlier. Now he won't talk anymore for the rest of his life. At the Ventric mansion, the family leader was there to receive Rokdo and furious about the stain he caused on the family's name. Rokdo's father and son went together to take the scolding. She, just opening her mouth to ask something, made him crap his pants. She just wanted to know what he would do about this. Rokdo says he will beg for her forgiveness, but she doesn't accept just that. The woman seemed about to kill them both right there but didn't. She says that his actions threw the family's name in the mud, all for a silly reason. The terror in the boy's eyes was visible. He even begged and said he would do anything to fix it. The woman then stated that the only way was for Rokdo to be expelled from the family. Rokdo's father tried to help his son against it, claiming that it was too extreme, but the woman was relentless, saying that if he didn't agree, he should accept being expelled instead of his idiot son. Even between father and son, there is a limit because the man refused. However, the woman is very smart, thinking to herself that she wanted the boy expelled now or even dead. Still, if she expelled the boy, it would be admitting that the Ventrics were guilty. So for now, she said she wouldn't expel Rokdo and they were in her hands and they should wait for her to think better. Her desire is to meet with Kim Joo Hyuk and think better about Rokdo's fate. So she ordered the father to keep an eye on his mediocre son from now on and be grateful for her compassion. Humiliated by the protagonist, he returned home to be even more humiliated by the family leader. Besides, the father also had to do the same, but that didn't happen. Rokdo tells his father that her intention is to expel him as soon as the dust settles, so he will have to do it, and the father will have to help for his son's sake. The father will support. At least he is a present father and helps his son, even if it's to do shit. Great dad. Meanwhile, at the Valhalla Academy, the protagonist is informed that the Ventric leader is coming to visit him to apologize, and the protagonist doesn't understand why such an important person would do that. It can't be good. The professor is also worried about the situation. Adelia, the Ventric leader, is coming today. They donated millions to the Academy. They are the biggest money donors, so the Academy will cover up everything. He wants to know if the protagonist understands what that means. Despite being a teenager in everyone's eyes, he is smart enough to know what it means and agrees. Some time passed until the woman arrived. The professor showed respect for someone so important and soon left, leaving the protagonist and the Ventric leader in the room. She introduced herself as someone refined and polite. The protagonist also knows how to behave with formalities. Moreover, the woman didn't understand how someone without a noble family wouldn't feel intimidated by her. As it's a peace mission, she apologizes for the Desira incident, to which the protagonist says it's okay. And now about minoxidil. She was going to talk about him, but the protagonist interrupts her to say it doesn't matter anymore. In the media interviews, she said he had nothing to do with it, so there's no reason to feel guilty. Now the true faces start to appear. She throws on the table that the media and public don't believe the Ventrix. What Adelia wants is the protagonist's help to change the public's opinion about her family. She practically offers everything in return: money, political support for him to enter the best guilds in Korea, and he just needs to help this time with this. To be sure, the protagonist asks if all he needs to do is make a statement and everything ends. This question was asked just to be sure of the woman's intentions. After the confirmation, he throws in her face that they must be desperate to offer so much to shut him up. They even crossed the continent to see him personally. Hayek immediately tells her the truth. He is irritated that they are trying to act like it was nothing and says he doesn't want to help with that. He states he doesn't eat any of what she offered. The best reward is seeing this family live with the dishonor Rockdale brought to them marked in history. The woman went crazy and wanted to kill the protagonist right there, but he doesn't bow to anyone. A boy without a noble family proves and says she doesn't have the courage to do what she wants here. She shows her true face, saying he is trash, making her waste time with arrogant trash without an aim. Adelia threatens that she will kill him now with all her power. The protagonist shows no sign of fear, confidently telling her to try her luck. He is smart and throws in her face that if the Ventrix said Rockdale was not guilty, threw a lot of money and offers to cover this trail. Killing him here is the last thing she would have the courage to do. The woman, exploding with anger, couldn't disagree with this statement. In the end, he was right, and Adelia gives up and threatens, saying he will regret today. The protagonist further insults her dignity by saying that all the Ventrix talk so much shit, it must be a family thing. Even Barche, who lives in his sword, asks if it was necessary to make such an enemy. For the protagonist, these people who think they should be revered are the ones he hates the most. This was the same reason he hated Barche 300 years ago. Because of this threat, the protagonist promises to go after these people who tried to put a collar on him in this era too. After this declaration of war, he goes to the Academy's training stadium, and there at the door, look who we find. Choi Aram is facing her older brother, whom the protagonist doesn't know yet. The guy was at the Academy, which he isn't even a student of, to oppress her and force her not to challenge him for the family leadership. His argument is that he doesn't want to destroy the girl in front of everyone, and that she has no chance of surviving if she faces him. Aram refuses to give up but doesn't have enough courage to face him. However, someone calls her brother a talentless shit, someone he doesn't even know insulting him like that. Perhaps it was a powerful noble to have that courage. The big brother who doesn't know the protagonist wants to know why he is suddenly insulting him. The only reason is to see another arrogant noble bragging about his family's position. That's why the protagonist expels the guy from the academy, also saying that anyone invading the academy to demand something from a student is wrong. He asks if Aram agrees, and she says yes, her cuteness blinding all of us. In that case, the brother threatens that they will settle things during the test and leaves. Aram thanks her master for his help, but to him, it was nothing, and now they should go train. But she has a complaint, saying she agreed when he asked, but she was planning to say something else. He got curious about what she wanted to say, but to avoid any issues with this video, I can't mention it in words here. A few days later, the protagonist went out in search of his old notes, which contained teachings on how to overcome the weaknesses of this body, so he can destroy a certain arrogant noble family. Meanwhile, the day for selecting the new leader of the Choi Jin family arrives. Being an important family, there are several reporters there to find out who the new leader will be. Inside, the fencing-obsessed girl and her despicable brother were ready for the test. Their father was about to start the test but first had to perform all the rituals and procedures, asking if everyone knew what was at stake and the importance of their family. The loser would be banished from the family, and the winner would become the future leader. Both said they were aware and prepared for this, so their father revealed the test. It was to find the dual blade hidden in the mountains. Whoever found the sword and brought it to him would be recognized as the winner of the selection test. It didn't matter how they obtained the sword, as long as they didn't kill each other, and so the test began. Aram eagerly ran to find the sword first, while her brother didn't even run, thinking that if he let her find the sword, he could just take it from her and win. Going back a few days to the day the protagonist humiliated her brother, he received a call from someone pressuring him to get the dual blade quickly and deliver it to them. Someone outside the clan had arranged for him to steal the sacred sword of his clan in exchange for a contract with a more powerful constellation. Aram, who was ahead, was using a technique to sense the energy of the environment to pick up the sword's trail. It would take her about 15 minutes to detect the sword's trail. trail, which was too long, giving her brother time to find her before she could. He questioned who taught her to track magical traces in the environment. Aram revealed it was her master. In the fencing lessons, he taught her magical control beyond the basics she already knew, and in these lessons, the protagonist wondered why the family didn't teach her anything, but from her expression, he understood more or less why. Setting that aside, he showed her how to better control the magical energy throughout her body, mastering her total energy so she could sense the magic in the surrounding environment too. On the first try, she managed to sense the mana around her and the object with the most mana nearby. With that, she could even sense the slightest magical energy nearby and avoid wasting her own mana as she improved her control. Magical objects emit energy too. The more control you have, the easier it is to track people and objects around you. With each lesson, she became more impressed and perhaps had feelings beyond gratitude. The brother remembered this so-called master, just a mere academy student who insulted him the other day. He insulted the protagonist, claiming that the boy was just a nameless and weak piece of trash. Insulting the first person who dedicated himself to training her in life couldn't be tolerated. Aram replied that that guy was much stronger than them and shouldn't be disrespected. Besides, if the challenge was to find the sword, why did he come to her? The despicable brother responded with his actions, attacking the girl. Before, she could never block his attacks, but this time he saw that things were different. She blocked and threw her brother back. He never expected such a big change and couldn't stop thinking about how it was possible. While the conflict was happening a few days before, Heinrich had gone out to search for his old notes he hid 300 years ago in his previous life. He was scouring various places around the mountains of the city when he finally found what he was looking for. However, far away, he sensed a great use of mana, which revealed itself to be a frantic exchange of sword blows between two siblings. Aram was fully focused on the fight, using all her acquired knowledge. Her brother's first comment was that she seemed stronger than before due to her increased physical strength. "Were you going to school or the gym, little sister?" her brother attacked, insulting her by calling her a bastard. One of the techniques Aram learned was put into practice. She concentrated her mana on the blade. When the attack came, she spun the sword and made an upward slash. Her brother fell like an NPC, and she followed up with a second blow, hitting his kidneys with all her strength using the sword's hilt. Previously, Aram never stood a chance against her older brother, but now she had surpassed him. "I didn't understand, but she said this is the family's dual blade." Aram realized that her brother was getting up, emanating a completely different aura. He insisted that someone like her would never beat someone like him who had a contract. He still claimed that the blow was a lucky hit. The girl was curious and asked if he had become a villain due to the strange aura. Aram asked if he was a villain now since the aura seemed evil. He responded that he would show through actions. She prepared to counterattack, but he dodged and made a direct hit. She fell, and what should have been red appeared black. He became confident again and asked if she could get up, but she had no strength left. The older brother admitted that he now belonged to the devotees, which according to Aram were the third most powerful evil group in the world. Her brother was using the power of one of the devotees' constellation. Things became even more complicated, and Aram questioned why he would join a criminal group and how they could offer more advantage than their rich family. Her brother replied that one of the constellation's powers was to no longer feel emotions. He revealed that since he was 12 years old, he worked for the guild to be an example, but in truth, he just wanted to play and be a normal kid. He joined the devotees to satisfy adolescent desires denied by the guild's obligations. When the devotees' leader found him, he didn't hesitate to accept, knowing his true nature, which included a sadistic side of enjoying breaking people. To officially join the devotees, he needed to deliver the dual blade, a family relic. 10 years ago, during a similar test, he killed his oldest sister in the mountains, something Aram believed was just a disappearance. He revealed that their mother fell with sadness seeing her oldest sister's face in Aram. He then challenged Aram to find her sister in the other world and cut off her scalp. Actually, that didn't happen. Near the test mountain, the protagonist was searching for something and sensed that a fight was happening. Hyok's sword blocked the blow, saving Aram at the last moment. "Teach me fencing?" the protagonist demanded he explain what he was doing with Aram. The brother replied that it was a family matter and told him to mind his own business. This made the hero furious. To teach a lesson, he landed a direct hit and threw the guy against a tree. When she recovered, Aram asked why he was there. The protagonist didn't reveal what he was actually doing and said he had business business in the middle of the forest while checking her injury. He told her to gather mana and concentrate on healing the wound quickly. He would handle the situation now. The arrogant brother got up and went to him, speaking again that it was a family matter, then attacking by concentrating energy on the sword. The protagonist took a single step to the side to dodge the attack. He was sure he wouldn't miss at that distance, but now he was hit again by a powerful attack. To finish the combo, he stepped on the guy and placed the sword sheath over him, delivering another powerful attack that destroyed everything around. Right after, he went to see if Aram was okay and asked if she could at least walk. Before that, the brother emitted an even more intense dark aura and got up again. He muttered something and jumped at the protagonist. Whether he was going to kick his head or strike with a sword, the protagonist defended effortlessly, and the guy realized it. What he also saw was a punch coming straight to his stomach, questioning if such strength was possible for someone his age. All the attacks were blocked effortlessly, and if he took one or two more hits, he would lose, so the villain decided to use that. He pulled out a stone, a fragment of an artificial relic, a copy of a real relic. By consuming it, he could form a temporary contract with a high-rank constellation. Even people outside the forest waiting for the test result could feel and see it too. That purple smoke in the sky. The family leader noticed it too and decided to interrupt the test. The older brother was overflowing with corrupt magic, but the protagonist asked if that was all. The brother mocked, saying that confidence would make him die faster. The constellation he contracted with was called the Dragon That Kills All, and the dragon showed its teeth in satisfaction of being summoned. The dragon that kills much activated its ability to scan everything. The dragon that kills all saw what it had to kill and almost died of fear. It even closed its eyes and wished it was a dream. It opened its eyes again and analyzed again, confirming the nightmare was real. The dragon that kills all told the boy it would retire now, canceled the contract, and fled. The protagonist then asked what the older brother had said before. Now, without any reinforcement in his body, this last attack took the soul out of his body. The third hit is the lucky one. The devotee's leader received the message. The dragon that kills all got into big trouble because of him. Do you want to disappear from this world? The devotee's leader didn't know why, but if he didn't beg now, he would die, so he begged for forgiveness. The dragon warned him not to distribute artificial relics anymore and to behave from now on. Look at the villain's mindset. After being forgiven, he realized it must have been the boy from the Chojin clan, so he decided to investigate what happened. That is, he would chase what terrified a constellation. Hyok returned home and took out of his backpack what he had been intensely searching for. He managed to recover his notes on divine arts, a breathing technique that can increase magical power to an impressive level. Talking to Barche, Hyok commented that the technique he used in his past life was inferior. When he found this manuscript, he couldn't learn it because his body was too accustomed to the technique he used all his life. He mentioned that if he had this technique before, he wouldn't have died then or been injured in that fight. Now, with his new body completely reset, Hyok would become incredibly powerful. He decided to stop training physically and focus on this new technique. The previous incident, where he almost killed Aram's brother but decided not to go all the way to avoid problems. He checked if Aram was okay and let her decide what to do with her brother. During that time, he noticed someone approaching, probably their father. Hyok warned Aram that her family was coming and suggested she claimed to have defeated her brother, who was using an evil relic. Before the family arrived, Hyok left and took the notes. The event severely damaged the Chojin family's reputation, as journalists present in front of the mountain reported on the family's involvement with the devotees, which could significantly impact the family, especially now that Aram was about to be named the next family leader. Aram went to the hospital but was not in life-threatening condition. She was portrayed as a heroine in the reports for defeating a member of the devotees despite being just a teenager. She followed Hyok's advice and told her family that she had defeated her brother after discovering his association with the devotees. When asked how she had enough power for that, she attributed her success to Hyok, who had been teaching her. Researching Hyok, her father saw that he was a delinquent, making him think his daughter was under bad influence. Sometime later, at the Valhalla Academy, the protagonist arrived in the classroom and noticed that Choi Aram had been discharged from the hospital and was back in classes. The girl seemed to sense his gaze or something because she turned to greet her master. She is a beautiful girl, and two guys walking behind the protagonist thought she was waving at them. Does she want my body? During the days following the fight in the forest, the protagonist trained his new technique constantly. Choi Aram informed him over the phone that she couldn't train due to the doctor's orders. A few days ago, Our protagonist mentioned that he would take care of some personal matters in the coming days. Since he needed some time alone, Aram was not sad about staying in the hospital, and whenever she texts, her excitement is 10 times greater than in person. The protagonist also remembers that Barche warned that the dark magic they saw earlier was familiar. However, there is something strange about it. He is sure it is familiar, but he can't remember it, as if something is preventing him from having memories about the dark magic. They are not sure, but they feel that the reason for this is the mysterious person who gave Barche possession of the Tower of the End in the past. If the protagonist can fulfill the system's second condition, things may become clearer. The system warned that he must take the sword in which Barche is sealed. In short, he has to go to this place at the academy, and the only way to infiltrate is during the academy's final exams at the end of the year. If he doesn't attend school or causes problems, he will be expelled. So, it's because of this that the protagonist has to work hard in school to pass. Finally, the class begins. The teacher arrives in the classroom and announces that there will be a big announcement now. They must be aware of the interschool competition that will take place next month. Just thinking about having to participate in a competition irritates Julia. Before the teacher said that the school would select the best students to participate, he already knew he would be selected because of his grades. Strangely, the teacher called the student to a private room before making the announcement. The teacher commented that they have been coming here to talk privately a lot lately. This is strange. It's obviously because you keep calling me here. The teacher knows this is true, but he judged it was important to talk to him first. Before he continued speaking, the protagonist said he refused. The teacher hadn't even said what it was about, but Juyuk already knew it was about this interschool competition. He is as smart as ever, but the teacher insists on explaining something specifically to him. There are 3 major hunter training institutions worldwide: Valhalla in Korea, White Lotus in China, and Heroes in the USA. Each of these 3 selects their first-year students to participate in the competition representing them. The competition involves fights, escaping from labyrinths, and other challenges. Obviously, they planned to send the first-year students with the best grades. All this was nonsense. It was more than obvious to the protagonist, so he was almost asleep. The teacher couldn't understand how a student wouldn't be interested in doing something so important. Regardless of the teacher's arguments, the protagonist said he wasn't interested in any reward. The teacher couldn't understand what was wrong with this kid, but then he argued that it was really important for the protagonist to go to the center of the Great Forest. He knows this because the protagonist previously asked for permission to go to this place and was denied. However, now he reveals that the interschool competition location would be held in Valhalla, and the final test is in the Great Forest. So, those who participate will go to the Great Forest and won't have to take the academy's final exams because the competition grades will replace them. The smart teacher spoke to him privately because he knew he would refuse in the classroom, so he had to convince him first. Now that he has a chance to reach his goals sooner, the protagonist agrees to participate in the competition. Now we are shown the Ventric property. Adelia, the family head, could not make a commoner like the protagonist's Bao, returned to England, and is preparing for something secret. It is something important that will take up to a month to complete, so she asks him to report concluding it as soon as possible. Additionally, she is curious about the events in Valhalla. The man reports that something curious is happening in Valhalla. It seems that the market is building a large building made of paper money. If even she didn't understand what that meant, then I don't care. All they know is that the one responsible is the Black Cat. The woman has no idea about the Black Cat's motivations, but the constellation she serves asks to speak with her. The constellation wants more details about this. The constellation's interest surprises Adelia. This is not common. We are also shown the market in the 7 territory. The Black Cat also doesn't know the purpose of his constellation in making these buildings, and for the first time, we see the appearance of a constellation. The woman just says it is a gift for him. The sneaky constellation's name is the Two-Faced Ruler. The Black Cat is her servant and doesn't know who would be worthy of a gift from his master. Is the deity he worships indebted to someone? The ruler questions if the cat has located the person who sold the ring. The cat hasn't yet. The only information the seller provided was that his voice was Yum. The constellation could no longer wait. Explanations were not enough. She needed it to be faster. The cat had never seen his master acting this way. Then we returned to Valhalla. The teacher had a difficult day. It is very complicated dealing with these nobles. The chief instructor asked if he had already chosen the students who would represent the academy in the competition. The teacher made the list. Here they are. To the chief instructor's surprise, the first name was not from an important family. This Kim Ju-hyuk is surprising. The teacher reveals that initially, the student didn't want to participate. But when he mentioned that the competition would take place in the center of the Great Forest, he changed his mind. The chief instructor says this is even stranger. Most people would hesitate after hearing that, not the opposite. Does this kid not know what the center of the Great Forest is? He sleeps in all the classes, so it would make sense, but that also wouldn't make him interested in this place. In this scenario, the chief instructor suggests that the teacher train them. So, a few days later, the 5 selected first-year students were gathered: Si-hyuk, Makema, Teach Me Fencing, Random Extra, and Ju-hyuk Kim. With everyone gathered, the instructor went to see the students. Even though everyone should already know who he is, he introduces himself again, saying it is a pleasure to meet them all. The reason they are gathered here is due to the competition, and he will explain how the special training they will undergo will be. There will be a total of 3 tests they will have to complete. The first is a fight between students. For the test they took to enter the academy, we will see again what you can do. The second test is a group fight. The 5 students from one academy will face 5 from another academy. The important thing about this test is that it won't be one-on-one. All 5 will fight simultaneously. And finally, the third test involves the center of the Great Forest. Just mentioning this name makes our protagonists pay more attention. Thanks to this competition, as it replaces their final exams at the academy, they will have plenty of time to prepare. So, no need to rush. The instructor explains that the center of the Great Forest is a labyrinth. It is different from a normal forest, so it is isolated by a gate and guards at all times. Due to this, it is secret what exists inside, so they cannot know anything except that the task they will receive will be given only on the day of the test. From now on, they will be trained to handle the first and second tests. While the teacher was talking about various important things, our protagonist was not paying attention to anything. All he could think about was the center of the Great Forest. As he saw before, there is a security barrier that prevents him from entering. Unfortunately, he is not strong enough to invade and will have to follow the rules to gain access to the place. While the teacher was still explaining other things, our protagonist said he had a question. He wanted to know if he could train alone. The instructor accepted his request to train for the competition. However, something unexpected happened. Choi Aram also asked to train alone. This raised more doubts for the instructor. The instructor also asked if anyone else wanted to do the same. None of the others said anything, so he will meet them during the training. After the meeting, everyone left the room except for 2 people. Ju-hyuk was wondering if he would master his new technique by the competition. Even though he is the legendary hero of the past, this body belonged to a careless failure. Aram stayed in the room just to ask her master if she should participate in the training too. To him, it didn't make sense for her to ask him about this, but he answered that she shouldn't push herself too hard due to her injuries, and that really worries the girl. The teacher, before choosing her to participate in the competition, asked if she was in good shape for it. Participating in the competition is very important for any student, but the only thing she wanted to know was if Ju-hyuk would participate. The teacher also can't predict this girl's thoughts. He told her that the protagonist would participate too, and that's why she agreed to participate as well. The teacher expected her to refuse because her body was not fully recovered. However, the girl insisted that she was fine and would recover in time. Given her determination, he allowed her to participate. Aram has already managed to enter the path to becoming the head of her family, but now the girl feels she wants something else too. The desire in her heart now is to become as strong as him to help him achieve his goals too. While she was thinking about all this, the girl kept looking at him and smiling without saying anything. Of course, the protagonist found it strange and suggested that since she couldn't train her body, she should focus on mana control. After he finishes his own work, he will return to help her personally. That same night, we are shown an abandoned building. Someone was screaming for property. "Stop pulling my teeth, I'll give you and tell you everything you want." Unfortunately, they weren't looking for information, just carrying out a simple job of eliminating a target. The woman wanted to finish this quickly, but the bald man didn't find it fun to be quick with these things. These people are professional assassins, and now that they have completed this mission, they will execute the next one. This new mission is very different from the usual because the target is simply a student from Valhalla. The information is that the client paid a lot of money, and the deadline to eliminate this target is 1 month, and it has to be during the inter-school competition. The bald man even questions why he can't kill him now. The woman said it's because security is too strong, Invading the academy and breaking the barrier is too risky. They must execute the plan when the academy is open to the public, and they can hide in the crowd. The girl says that the third test will be held in the center of the Great Forest, a mysterious labyrinth created from the very forest it resides in. The information is that the final test will be to escape that labyrinth, and there will be no instructors around. This will be the moment they will act. So, without further ado, we skip forward a month in time to the first day of the interschool competition. All the students are watching their classmates compete. Rockdale returned to the academy after Desira confessed to being solely responsible for the attack. All Rockdale has to do is wait for those people to do their job. The son called his father and confirmed that he had contacted that pair of professionals, the best and most expensive assassins, and they would do the dirty work this time. Rockdale did all this without his father having any connection to him. If something goes wrong, the boy will take full responsibility, but Rockdale assures his father that there will be no mistakes this time because the Samsao group will handle it. Even the boy's father knows who these people are. It's the group those two weirdos are part of. If this is necessary to rebuild the son's reputation, the father asks Rockdale not to do anything risky now. The assassins confirm they accepted the job, so Rockdale is eager to have his revenge against that commoner. The president of the Valhalla Council announces the start of the competition. Shim Diaquan introduces the students from China, the White Lotus, the heroes from the United States, and finally, the representatives of South Korea, Valhalla. The competition will last for 3 days. Today's task is an individual duel between the students, he announces. After passing on the information and holding the ceremony, he asks everyone to return to the waiting room. The chief instructor is eager to see the results of the new generation. Moreover, he was also eagerly waiting for this guy, the senior instructor of the heroes, Jack Rover. The two already know each other, and our senior instructor jokes with his friend, calling him Mr. Third Place. Jack reminds him that Valhalla didn't come in first that time either, but now it will be different. This year the heroes will definitely come in first place. The Americans' confidence was high, the reason being the pinnacle of all contractors, the only one. Senkyo mentions that this is the guy called Logan, the Destroyer. To our instructor's surprise, this guy's son is at the academy and will represent the United States. The genius boy is right there, Logan Jr. From his appearance, our instructor recognizes that he seems very competent and is eager to see him in combat. Jack mentions that the boy made a contract with the same constellation as his father. Despite this, Jack also heard that Valhalla has incredible talents this year, especially that boy Kim Ji-ya. He was quite excited about the fight between the boys, but our instructor was no longer interested. He only mentioned that soon he would understand why he didn't have high expectations, and to our delight, the first fight announced was between Valhalla and the heroes. The two boys were selected for the first match. The president announces that the rules are simple, they just can't kill each other. The security system prevents fatal damage. So, the hits landed in this arena will be transformed into pain by electrical impulses. In other words, feel free to go all out, because here you don't need to hold back. After the countdown, they can begin. Our protagonist was calm. He didn't need to overdo it. 3, 2, and 1. Juyak quickly approached and struck. To his surprise, until today, no one had ever blocked any of his blows, but it just happened. Who is this guy? He is strong. Logan asks if the protagonist thinks he is strong with such an attack. GX said he still has a long way to go. Really? He said that the protagonist is more modest than he thought. For a moment, we believed that the opponent was strong, but it's not quite like that. Juyuk asks if he can withstand his blows over time and spins the boy in the air. Then he lands a precise blow to the nipples. This time, Logan acknowledged that this blow was heavy, and our protagonist recognized that the opponent is quite tough. The two instructors were watching the fight. Senkyol states that Logan is quite tough for withstanding a blow from the protagonist. Jack saw all the videos of this boy and trained the students. Juyuk wasn't supposed to be this scary, but it is still too early to give up. Logan hasn't used destruction yet, and now he attacks using magical energy. With this kind of power, our protagonist has to dodge. He feels that this energy is dangerous. Despite having destructive power, he doesn't have the same level of fighting skill. His hair was cut. Juyuk is sure that this boy Logan would be a great hairdresser. Logan realized that if he can't land his blows, there is no reason to use destruction. In fact, he doesn't have to use it conventionally. He places his hands on the ground and channels his energy through the stadium. Using his power, he can distract the opponent by raising pieces of the arena. If the opponent can't locate him among the debris, he won't be able to dodge the attacks. This is the expectation of an inexperienced boy. However, Juhyuk easily saw his movements and was able to dodge and even throw a piece of rock at his opponent's face. The protagonist uses this moment to tell the boy that if he is hiding, it becomes easy to find him. If he is using magic, he can simply sense the energy. Why not try throwing a punch like this, without magic, and hit the opponent's nose? With just one more precise blow, the victory went to the Korean team. Senkyeol was confident in this result, but Jack was stunned. That boy is a monster. The next duels took place, and all the enemies were easily defeated. When there were no more enemy opponents to face, Valhalla had to face their own team in the final round, and to fill the protagonist with pride, Choi Aram was the finalist. The girl also talked about this. Valhalla's victory is guaranteed, so there is no reason for them to fight with full strength. However, it is the winner who will receive a scholarship, and she doesn't need the money, so if Juhyuk wants, she can forfeit. Juhyuk replies that he also doesn't care about the money, but still, Aram can't forfeit. He also wanted her to show how much she had improved, so he asked her to give her best in the fight. Without hesitation, the girl prepared to attack with her thunderous sword. Before, her skill was already something incredible. Now, her control was on another level. The fight between these two monsters shocked the entire arena. Even the senior instructors couldn't believe what they were watching. This was a high-level battle.